Well, hey there team, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to my overview of Drova, Forsaken Kin. So for those not across it, I do overviews on this channel. I have a look at the first 2 hours of a game. That's the Steam refund window. Steam says that you should be able to make your mind up about whether you want to keep a game or not in that time period, and broadly speaking, as a rule, I would agree, and say 20 hours in, you often won't change your mind about how you felt 2 hours in. So it's a short, punchy video. I keep it around 10 minutes, give you the broad strokes info, and then you can make up your mind on your own. So what I reckon of Drova, this is really cool, actually. And it's a bit of a throwback to sort of RPGs of yesteryear. The hope that I can help it find its crowd, because yeah, it's actually really quite immersive. I've heard it compared to things like Gothic, but unfortunately that sort of sits outside of my wheelhouse. You know, everyone has blind spots, even me who plays just about everything. So maybe if you're a Gothic fan and you look at this and you go, oh yeah, Gothic in this art style, that works for me. Well, apparently that's kind of what this is. Others have compared it to, say, Morrowind. I guess maybe, you know, in that sort of swampy otherworld kind of way. Funnily enough, and it's a bit of a tenuous comparison, but the one that jumps to mind for me is things like the original Secret of Mana. Even though that's a JRPG, the sort of real-time combat, the art style, and the perspective, obviously. But just moving around the world, it makes me think of when I first played that as a kid. And you didn't really know where you were going, you just sort of follow paths, and this is pretty thin with maps. You can pick them up and buy them, and I made a bit of a devil's agreement to buy a good map from some dude, and I'll have to pay him back, so that's going to come back to bite me, I'm sure. But it sort of leans back to a time that I think is kind of sorely missed, where, you know, UI delivery of a lot of information was less of a thing in a game. Sure, you still have menus and you have level up points and inventory and that sort of thing, but outside of that, the game's fairly immersive in and of itself. At its core, the setup is pretty tropey, like you are from this sort of, oh I don't know, kind of Nordic druidish band of people. They've got this red crystal MacGuffin thing. You kind of follow some druids into the forest when they're going off to do some experiment with them. Turns out it opens up a passageway that teleports you to this land called Drova. The funny thing that I actually quite like is that this seems to have happened to all the other people before. In a way, they've all had their own protagonist arc that got them through this portal into this distant land, and it's all kind of utopic. You were tasked by these druids to take this crystal to this sort of capital city, Nemetron I think it's called, but the bridge is out, so you're sort of stuck in a beginning tutorialize-ish start a village while they get their shit together and build the bridge. But yeah, talking to people and that, when you go up to them and say, hey, I've got video game bloody deja vu, I don't know what a sword is, sort of thing. They're all like, hey, we've been there before, welcome to the bloody place. Well, as welcome as it could be. Again, it is kind of a bit of a miserable, dangerous world that wants to kill you, and everyone is kind of united in this mythic fable, as it were, to try and build up Drova, or at least make something of themselves while they're there. I think it's actually a really good setup as far as a video game goes. A couple of interesting standouts. I actually really like the way that they do leveling up in this. You have sort of a prowess level, which it's probably best described as an account level, but as opposed to being dictated by, let's say, arbitrary XP points, when you do level up, you unlock learning points. At the moment it's like 4 at a time, maybe that's how it is forever. And as you travel along, you'll come across various people. You know, I've met some sword and shield lady and a dude that's good at axes, but I even met like a trapper, all these different people that you can learn kind of little skills off of them. Whether it's passives, like when I loot I can now skin, and that means I can get, you know, claws off animals, which are kind of just a general barter item. So, you know, that's kind of a way to increase your economic footprint. But then others will give you skills like the ability to bleed with when you charge up, essentially like a melee stamina charge system, where as you fight more and melee more, you generate this game's essential mana. And a lot of these abilities are kind of gated by said prowess level. So you'd have to spend, let's say, 2 learning points to learn skinning, but maybe your prowess level has to be 20. And that is the summation of all your different stat line points. So say you leveled up only strength or only dexterity or a mixture of both. Once the total gets to 20, they will start saying, well, your prowess, generally speaking, as a warrior, is high enough. I will now teach you skinning. I think it's really clever, actually. It's not super complex. It might sound complex explaining it, but it feels a lot more organic than just sort of arbitrary 3 out of 100 for alchemy. The combat is clean and standard fare, very much sort of action-based. You sort of dodge around with a spacebar kind of thing. You hit dudes, you can right-click to do a special ability or a shield block if you have a shield. And then beyond that, on keyboard at least, it's Q for whatever, I don't want to say spells, but whatever skill you've got slotted. You can use a radial to change which one it is. And yeah, that's basically hit a dude a couple of times, generate stamina, trade in said stamina to fire off an ability. It works, it's all very, very clean. And there is a dynamism to it, like you can use tab to bring up that radial, and I've got a couple of skills, like a dodge, a bleed, that sort of thing. So as the fight requires, you can sort of dynamically switch whichever one's in your quick fire slot. There also seems to be a magic system. I've come across like scrolls, which I immediately wasted and one shot fired, but they seem quite powerful, so who knows where that's going. In fact, even as I say that, another comparison that this does remind me of is Outward. And people who played that will appreciate, again, it had this sort of, not necessarily hardcore, though I would argue aspects of Outward were kind of hardcore, but definitely sort of a nostalgic bent to its general world design, in that we're not necessarily going for the Dark Souls of, difficulty, etc. But we are going for, let's just put you in this sort of world and let you explore it. You do have missions that you can find, so it's not what I would call sandbox. It's rather that the answers and the quests and the things to do are all out there. You just have to go out and find them. So yeah, I find that it does sort of tap that wanderlust, that, the fellowship going out into the world, the favorite parts of fantasy that I personally have, which are that sort of on-ramp process of learning the world and the people in it and exploring away and doing your part to get ahead as well. There's, trading, bartering, that sort of thing, but it would seem that the drip feed of loot is a pretty cool progress marker as well. I managed to actually happen upon this pretty cool spear in a bit of an out-of-the-way area, and that's kind of my main weapon now, out of necessity, which is good. Like, there are games, not to get too sidetracked, but you think of your Borderlands and all that, where the gimmick is having a billion different types of weapons with different affixes and so on. And, they lean more into that loot, that overwhelming amount of loot. But then you have, and that works within its own right. And it becomes more about picking through the stuff and trying to find the right piece of gear for you. But I kind of like the other end quite a bit as well, where it gets almost a bit more survival-y RPG, in that you are eking out your existence. You're trying to find your profit margin to maybe buy a better pair of boots to get your foot up in the world. And that's what Drova kind of taps. And I really like it. Anyway, those are my thoughts so far. A wonderful game, and the hope is that it finds its crowd. Team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I will catch you guys on the next one.